At 9:12 in the morning, Sloan Ackerley fired a man for being $8 short and looking like he couldn't afford to lose it. "I have to be able to trust the people who touch cash," she said, sliding the termination across her desk with one manicured finger, careful not to let the paper touch his sleeve. "And frankly, Ezra, you've never looked like a man I could trust with money." Ezra Booker was 52 years old. He wore a coat that had been good once resoled boots, and the tired patience of a man who has been underestimated so many times it stopped being an insult and became a kind of weather. He did not argue. He signed where she pointed. He asked one question quietly. "Can my daughter finish her juice box before we go?" Sloan almost smiled at that. Almost. She said he had 10 minutes to clear his locker, and she had security walk him out through the lobby, past the marble wall, past the big oil portrait of the bank's founder, past the banner that said, "Hendricks Mutual, 100 years of trust," and the caterers setting up for the ceremony that afternoon. At 3:58 that same day, in that same lobby, under that same portrait, the chairman of the board took the microphone away from Sloan Ackerley. Mid-sentence, looked out at 200 people and said, "Before I go on, is Ezra still in the building? Somebody find Ezra. None of this exists without him." And Sloan Ackerley, who had 8 hours earlier decided exactly how much a man in a worn coat was worth, felt every drop of blood in her body go looking for somewhere else to be. This is the story of $8. And $8, it turns out, was where the whole thing started 34 years before anyone in that lobby was born into the version of themselves that mattered. Here is what the Fairview branch believed about Ezra Booker. They believed he was the quiet older teller who took the early ATM servicing shift. Nobody wanted who packed the same lunch every day, who drove a hatchback with a booster seat, who never joined the after-work drinks, and who this was. The settled consensus, arrived at the way offices arrive at things, through 100 small, unspoken agreements, was probably just getting by, living check to check. A nice enough man who'd landed somewhere modest and stayed. Here is what was true. Ezra Booker was the anonymous chairman of the Walter Hendricks Foundation, and the foundation's endowment, $86 million in cash, bonds, and managed holdings, was the single largest deposit relationship at Hendricks Mutual Bank. It had been for 11 years. Every branch in the network, including Fairview, borrowed its liquidity against that relationship. The floor Sloan Ackerley stood on was in a way she would have found literally unbelievable that morning, held up by the man she had just walked out the door. Nobody knew. That was the whole design. Ezra had made anonymity a condition when he seeded the foundation and the two people at the bank who knew the truth. The chairman of the board and the general counsel had kept it for over a decade, because Ezra had asked them to and because they understood why. The why was a man named Walter Hendricks, and $8 and a night in 1990. Ezra was 17 and had been a ward of the county since he was 9. He was hungry in the specific organizing way that hunger becomes when it's the main fact of your life, and on a cold night in November he walked into a corner branch of a small bank to get out of the wind, and he palmed $8 off a stack of promotional dollar coins the bank had set out in a dish by the door for a holiday drive. $8. He was going to eat. The old man who caught him did not call the police. The old man's silver-haired cardigan, a face like a walnut, sat him down, bought him a genuinely terrible cup of vending machine cocoa, and asked him one question that Ezra Booker would spend the rest of his life answering. "Son," Walter Hendricks said, "if I gave you a reason to be trusted, do you think you could carry it?" He gave Ezra a job sweeping the branch, then a job counting the coin. Then, when the boy turned out to have a mind that could hold numbers the way a net holds water, a reason and a reference and a co-signature on a community college loan. Walter Hendricks did not adopt Ezra Booker, and he did not make a project of him, and he never once told the story to make himself look good. He just kept giving a foster kid reasons to be trusted one at a time, and watching him carry every one. Ezra built a logistics software company in his 30s, ran it lean for 9 years, and sold it for a number with a lot of zeros. Walter had been dead 2 years by then, and Ezra, who had more money than a childhood like his was ever supposed to see, did the two things that made the rest of his life make sense. He put nearly all of it into a foundation, in Walter's name, scholarships, second chances, foster-to-career programs, the exact machine that had been built for him one reason at a time. And he took a job as a teller at Hendricks Mutual at the Fairview branch on the same corner where a bank had once stood in 1990. People who found out later always asked the same thing. Why would a man worth that much stand at a teller window? And the honest answer, the one Ezra only ever said out loud to his daughter, was, "Because I wanted to be standing exactly where Mr. Walter was standing the night he decided I was worth $8. I wanted to be that for whoever walks in next." He'd been at Fairview 6 years when Sloan Ackerley transferred in to manage it. If you want to understand what Sloan Ackerley threw away, you had to watch Ezra Booker work a Tuesday. There was a woman named Delphine who came to Fairview on the first of every month, 81 years old, with a purse full of correspondence she didn't trust herself to read anymore, and a deep, quiet terror of being the kind of old person who gets taken advantage of. Every teller in the branch knew to route her to Ezra. He'd take 20 minutes with her. 20 minutes on a metric that measured him by the second, and go through each letter and tell her which ones were real and which ones were vultures, and he never once made her feel slow, and she left every first of the month standing a little straighter than she came in. Sloan had watched that happen exactly once from her office, and what she'd seen was 20 minutes of cost. Grace. Lou, 3 windows down, had watched it too when she was 2 weeks into the job and certain she was about to be fired for a misfeed that had frozen her whole line. She'd been near tears. And Ezra had leaned over without being asked and said the thing she'd carry the rest of her career. "The machine's allowed to be wrong. That's what we're here for. We're the part that checks. Take the 60 seconds. Nobody ever got fired for taking the 60 seconds. Then he'd fixed it, and never mentioned it again, and made her look competent in front of a customer who never knew anything had gone sideways. That was the man. Not a saint. Ezra would have hated the word, just a person who had decided a long time ago in a cold branch with a terrible cup of cocoa that the whole point of being trusted was to hand the trust forward out loud to the next person who looked like they'd been told all their life they didn't deserve it. He was standing in a branch held up by his own $86 million, teaching a scared 24-year-old that the machine is allowed to be wrong. And the woman in the corner office had looked at all of it and seen a slow old man in a bad coat. Sloan Ackerley was 44 and had a plan, and the plan did not have room in it for a 52-year-old man in re-soled boots. She'd been brought to Fairview with a mandate she liked to call modernization. Fairview was the flagship, the founders branch, the centennial branch, and corporate wanted it to look like the future, younger, faster Glacier, the kind of branch that photographs well in an annual report. Sloan's bonus and the regional job dangling just past it were tied to a set of numbers she'd internalized so completely they'd stopped feeling like choices. Cost per transaction, digital adoption rate, and a soft unwritten one that everybody in banking understands and nobody puts in an email branch image. Ezra Booker was by every metric on Sloan's dashboard a problem. He was slow, not in error, never in error, but in the deliberate way of a man who actually talked to the elderly customers who came to his window, who walked the widow from the third pew through her beneficiary forms twice. He was old. He drove the wrong car. He wore the wrong coat. He made the branch look like the past on the exact day corporate wanted it to look like the future. She had already eased out 2 longtime employees that year on thin, tidy pretexts, a scheduling infraction, a dress code write-up that escalated. Both older. Both a lawyer would later note fitting a pattern. Ezra was the third name on a list she had never written down, but absolutely kept. She just needed a reason. And the centennial was coming, which meant the whole thing had a clock on it. 7:50 a.m. Ezra clocks in for the early ATM servicing shift. Daughter Nia in tow, schools closed for a teacher day, and the sitter fell through, and Sloan had grudgingly allowed the 7-year-old to sit in the break area for 1 hour out of sight. Nia has a juice box, a coloring book, and a folded piece of construction paper she made at home, a birthday card. For the bank. Because her dad told her the bank was turning 100 today, and to Nia, a 100th birthday is the most exciting thing she has ever heard of. 8:15 a.m. The caterers arrive. The banner goes up. Somewhere across town in a car, Adele Hendricks Walter's daughter, 60 years old, chairman of the board, is being driven to the branch her father founded for a ceremony at 4 o'clock that she has been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. 8:40 a.m. The overnight ATM reconciliation posts. The machine is $8 short. $8. On the founders branch. On Centennial morning. Under the servicing log of the one employee Sloan Ackerley had been waiting all year for a reason to remove. She looked at that number on her screen for a long, still moment, and then she smiled because a reason had finally arrived, and it had arrived wearing the smallest, most humiliating denomination she could possibly have hoped for. Here is the thing about the $8, and it matters because it's the hinge. Ezra Booker had flagged that ATM 3 weeks earlier. In writing. Through the branch maintenance portal ticket time-stamped describing a dispense rounding fault in the machine's aging cassette mechanism that occasionally miscounted low-denomination reloads by a few dollars in either direction. He'd asked for a service call. The ticket had been marked reviewed and closed with no action because approving a service call cost money and cost per transaction was on Sloane Ackerley's dashboard. She had closed the ticket herself. So when the machine came up $8 short on Centennial morning, the paper trail did not say Ezra Booker careless with cash. The paper trail said Ezra Booker warned us this exact machine would do this exact thing, and the manager ignored him to protect a number. She knew that. That's what made what she did next a choice, and not a mistake. 9 a.m. She called him into her office. Brandon Teague, her assistant manager. 29, eager, the kind of man who laughs a half-second before he understands the joke, stood by the door like a bailiff. "There's an $8 variance on the machine you serviced," Sloane said. "Walk me through it." "It's the cassette fault," Ezra said. "The one on ticket 4109. I flagged it 3 weeks ago. It under and over dispenses on the low reloads. Pull the ticket, it's all there. And pull the dual custody log. I ran the reload with Grace as second signer by the book. The $8 isn't gone. It's stuck in the count. Service the machine and it reconciles." Rung 1. Sloane didn't pull the ticket. She folded her hands. "That ticket was closed. You closed it." "I'm not going to relitigate a maintenance decision," she said. "What I have is a cash variance on a drawer you're responsible for on the most scrutinized day of the year for this branch and a history of you being—" She searched for the word that would sound like management and not like what it was, resistant to modernization. Rung 2. Ezra kept his voice level. "Ms. Ackerley, check the log. 60 seconds. It clears me and it clears the branch before the auditors ever see it. That's the outcome that's good for you." And this is the moment that tells you who Sloane Ackerley was, because she considered it. You could see her consider it the easy exit, the 60-second phone call, the version where she was reasonable. And she turned it down because turning it down meant she got to keep the reason, and she wanted the reason more than she wanted to be right. "I don't think I need a lecture on outcomes from a teller," she said. Rung 3. She slid the paper across. "Termination for cause. Cash handling misconduct. Effective immediately. You warned us the machine would do this," Ezra said quietly, not touching the page. "It's in your own system under your own login that you closed my ticket. You understand that when someone eventually reads it in order, this is going to look exactly like what it is." For 1/2 second, something flickered behind Sloane Ackerley's eyes. Not guilt. Calculation. The specific flinch of a person who has just been told the shape of the thing that will one day be used against them, and has decided to bet that no one will ever bother to read it in order. "Sign it or don't," she said. "Either way, you're done at 9 o'clock. He signed it. Because he had a 7-year-old in the break room, and because 34 years of being underestimated had taught him that the man who stays calm is the man who's still standing when the room finally turns. He just didn't tell Sloane Ackerley that the room was going to turn at 4. They walked him out at 9:12. Sloane could have let it be quiet. She chose the lobby. She had Brandon and a security contractor escort Ezra across the full length of the marble floor in front of the tellers, in front of the caterers, in front of Grace Liu. 26. 3 years in the second signer on the reload, the one person in the building who had watched Ezra Booker be patient with her when she was new and terrified, and certain she'd be fired for a misfeed. Grace stood up at her window. "He ran that reload with me," she said, loud enough to carry. "Dual custody. By the book. I signed it. The $8 is the machine he filed the ticket. I saw him file it." Grace. Sloane didn't even turn around. "Sit down, or you can walk out behind him." Grace Liu, 3 years in with rent and a car payment and a mother she helped support, stood there with the truth in her mouth and the whole weight of the room on it. And she sat down. She would not forgive herself for that, for exactly 6 hours and 48 minutes, which is how long it took the day to hand her a second chance. But at 9:13 in the morning, she sat down, and Ezra Booker caught her eye as he passed and gave her the smallest shake of his head. "It's all right. It's not your fight. And that mercy in that moment was almost worse than the firing. They walked him past the founder's portrait. Walter Hendricks, oil on canvas, silver hair, a face like a walnut painted from a photograph Ezra had actually been standing just outside the frame of. Ezra looked up at it as he passed. He didn't slow down, but his hand came up briefly and touched the wooden frame at the bottom the way you'd touch a headstone or a door frame on your way out of a house you built. Nia was in the break room with her juice box and her birthday card and her coloring book. Ezra crouched down to her level. "We're going to go, baby." "Did you get done early?" "Something like that." Nia looked at him with her mother's clear eyes, her mother who had left when Nia was 2 and sent a birthday card most years, and did the thing Nia did, which was see straight through a wall of grown-up calm to the thing behind it. "Did the lady be mean to you?" "A little," Ezra admitted, because he did not lie to his daughter. Nia's small face set. She looked at the door and at the lobby beyond it, and at the whole 100-year-old marble world that had just been unkind to the best person she knew, and something happened in that 7-year-old that historians of the Booker family would later date as the exact beginning of the end of Sloane Ackerley's career. Nia decided to give her birthday card to the person in charge. Here is what almost happened. Nothing. Ezra took Nia's hand, and they walked toward the doors, and in another version of this day, they simply left, and the ATM got serviced next week, and the $8 reconciled itself, and Ezra Booker filed a wrongful termination claim that settled quietly in 14 months, and Sloane Ackerley got her regional promotion and never once found out what she'd nearly stepped on. But at 9:15, a black car pulled up outside the Fairview branch 4 hours early, because Adele Hendricks could not sit in her house one more minute on the 100th anniversary of her father's bank, and she had told her driver to just take her there. She'd wait inside. She wanted to sit in the lobby before the crowd came and think about the old man for a while. Adele Hendricks came through the front doors at the exact moment Ezra and Nia were walking out of them. They didn't see each other clearly. A shoulder, a coat. The ordinary collision of 2 people in a doorway. "Excuse me?" "Sorry, go ahead." Ezra, head down, a box of desk things under one arm and a child's hand in the other, did not look up. Adele braced for a day of grief and performance, registered only a tired man and a small girl, and stepped aside. But Nia looked up. Nia saw a woman in a beautiful coat who had walked in like she owned the place, and Nia who had a birthday card for the person in charge, and a father who'd just been treated unkindly by the last person who seemed in charge, made a 7-year-old's leap of logic that happened to be for once exactly correct. She stopped. She let go of her dad's hand. She held up the folded construction paper. "Are you the boss of the bank?" Adele Hendricks looked down. Sort of, sweetheart." "Why?" "It's the bank's birthday," Nia said with the gravity of someone delivering the most important news in the world. "It's 100. I made it a card. But my dad got done early because a lady was mean to him, so we have to go." She pushed the card into Adele's hands. "You can give it to the bank. He said Mr. Walter gave him the $8. Adele Hendricks went very still. "What did you say?" "My dad." Nia pointed at the back of the tired man in the doorway who had just turned box under his arm to see where his daughter had gone. "He said a long time ago Mr. Walter gave him $8 and that's why he works here. And now a lady said he took $8 and he has to go home." Nia's chin wobbled just slightly on the unfairness of a number meaning 2 such different things. "But he didn't take it. My dad doesn't take things." And Adele Hendricks, 60 years old, chairman of the board, daughter of a man with a face like a walnut, who had told her 100 times a story about a hungry boy and $8 and a terrible cup of cocoa. A story she had grown up on, a story she had assumed was half a parable, lifted her eyes from the child to the man in the doorway. She had never met Ezra Booker. Anonymity had seen to that. She knew the foundation chairman only as a name on documents and a voice on 2 phone calls a year. But she knew the story. God, she knew the story. Her father had told it from his deathbed. "Sir," Adele said, and her voice did something that made Ezra Booker stop where he stood. "I'm sorry. Your daughter says she mentioned Walter. Walter Hendricks." She was holding the birthday card in both hands like it might blow away. $8. And cocoa from a machine that he always said the cocoa was terrible. He was proud of how terrible it was. Ezra Booker set the box down on the marble floor. "Who are you?" he said quietly. I'm his daughter, Adele said. I'm Adele, and I think I've been signing papers with your name on them for 11 years without ever once seeing your face. Her eyes were bright now. You're the chairman. You're the foundation. You're the boy. You're the $8. The lobby had gone quiet in the way lobbies do when something is happening that the front desk can't categorize. They walked you out, Adele said. It wasn't a question. She'd seen the box. She'd seen the security contractor still standing awkwardly by the door. This morning, somebody walked you out of my father's branch. It's fine, Ezra started. It's a personnel. It is not fine, Adele Hendricks said, and for the first time all day, her grief found something useful to become. What time is the ceremony? 4 o'clock, Ezra said. Adele Hendricks looked at her watch. Then she looked at the caterers and the banner and the portrait of her father and the manager's office door across the lobby with its frosted glass and its brass nameplate reading S. Ackerley. Then we have until 4 o'clock, she said. And I would very much like you to stay in the building, Mr. Booker. Both of you. There's cocoa in the catering setup. I'm told it's excellent, which my father would have hated. You will notice Adele Hendricks did not storm across the lobby and fire Sloane Ackerley at 9:20. That's the part that made it land. Because Adele had run a bank board for years and she understood something Sloane had forgotten, that the truth is more devastating when it's documented than when it's shouted. A furious chairman firing a manager in a lobby is a story about two people having a bad morning. A chairman who quietly gathers the record and lets the manager climb one more rung in public on stage at 4 o'clock is a story about consequences. So Adele spent the hours the way Walter's daughter would. 11:40 a.m. She had General Counsel pull ticket 41-09, the cassette fault report Ezra had filed 3 weeks earlier, and the audit log showing who had reviewed and closed it. The login stamp read, S. Ackerley. She had them pull the dual custody reload log, which showed Ezra and Grace Liu by the book. She had them pull the year's terminations at Fairview and lay them side by side, 3 employees all over 50, all eased out on escalating thin pretexts, all under one manager. She did not editorialize. She just built the stack. 1:15 p.m. She met with Ezra in the back office, the one where 34 years and 1 building ago an old man had bought a boy a cup of cocoa. She did not offer him his job back as a favor. She offered him something else. I can make this quiet, she said. You know I can. Settlement apology. She never knows how close she came. You'd probably prefer quiet. You've spent 11 years being invisible on purpose. I would prefer quiet, Ezra admitted. But Ezra was silent for a moment. He thought about Grace Liu sitting down at her window with the truth still in her mouth. He thought about the 2 people eased out before him who hadn't had $86 million and a founder's daughter to walk through a door at exactly the right minute. He thought about what it means when the only reason justice arrives is that the victim happens secretly to be powerful, and how many people that leave standing in a lobby with no one coming through the door for them. Mr. Walter didn't do it quiet, Ezra said finally. He caught a kid stealing and he sat him down where everyone could see, and he made trust a public thing. That was the whole lesson. Trust isn't a favor you do in a back room. It's a thing you say out loud in front of people so it counts. He looked at her. She fired me in the lobby on purpose, Adele, in front of everyone, so they'd all see what she thought I was worth. Adele Hendricks nodded slowly. There's a version of you, she said, that would let me keep the $86 million out of it entirely. Just the ticket, just the pattern, just the facts, fire her for cause and never say the word foundation. Cleaner, you stay invisible. That version's tempting, Ezra admitted, but then it's a story about a manager who broke a rule, Ezra said. And the lesson people take home is don't get caught breaking the rule. That's not the lesson. He turned Nia's crumpled birthday card over in his hands. The lesson is that she'd have done the exact same thing to a man who really was poor and been right on every metric, and nobody would have walked through a door to stop it. I don't want them to learn she picked the wrong guy. I want them to learn there was never a right guy. That's worth coming out of 11 years of hiding for. That's the only thing that is. Adele Hendricks looked at him for a long moment, and something in her face was very close to the look her father used to get. Then we'll settle it in the lobby, she said, in front of everyone, at 4 o'clock. 2:50 p.m. The guests began to arrive. Board members, local press, a photographer from the regional paper Retirees, who'd banked at Fairview for 50 years. And Sloane Ackerley in a new blazer moving through the crowd with the bright, brittle energy of a woman who believed this was the most important afternoon of her career. She had no idea it was. She'd been told the chairman wanted her to say a few words before the chairman's remarks. A 2-minute welcome branch performance highlights the modernization story. Sloane had prepared it lovingly. Cost per transaction down, digital adoption up. The future of Hendricks Mutual standing right here at Fairview. She did not know that Ezra Booker and his daughter were in the back office eating catered cocoa. She had seen him walked out at 9. As far as Sloane Ackerley knew, the problem had been solved before breakfast. 3:40 p.m. Adele Hendricks found Grace Liu at her window and asked her one quiet question. This morning, when she walked him out, "Did you try to say something?" Grace's face crumpled. "I tried. And then I sat down. I should have." "You're 26 and you were scared and you told the truth anyway out loud before you sat down," Adele said. "That's more than the two managers standing next to her did." She put a hand on Grace's shoulder. "Stay near the front. I may need someone who saw it with their own eyes." 3:58 p.m. Sloane Ackerley stepped up to the microphone under the portrait of Walter Hendricks in front of 200 people and began the most important speech of her life. She got about 90 seconds in. "And none of this modernization happens without a team that understands that trust is the currency we really trade in." Sloane was saying, warming up the phrase "trust" is the currency one she was particularly proud of. "Here at the Founders Branch, we honor Walter Hendricks's legacy every single day by, I'd like to say something about my father's legacy." Adele Hendricks had crossed to the microphone. She did it without hurry. She put her hand gently over Sloane's on the mic stand, a small, public, unmistakable transfer of authority, and Sloane caught mid-sentence, stepped back with a bright, confused smile, assuming this was the chairman's warmth, the founder's daughter wanting to add a word. "Of course," Sloane murmured. "Please." Adele turned to the room. "My father started this bank 100 years ago with a belief that got him laughed at by every serious banker of his generation," she said. "He believed you could tell more about a person from how they behave when they have nothing than from how they behave when they have everything. He believed the whole job of a bank, the whole job was to be the place that bets on people before it's obvious." She paused. "He used to tell a story to prove it. Some of you have heard it. About a hungry boy and $8 and the worst cup of cocoa ever made." A few of the older retirees chuckled. They'd heard it. "I always thought it was half a parable," Adele said. "A nice story he polished up. I found out this morning it was true, all of it. And I found out the boy in the story has been standing in this building at a teller window for 6 years because he wanted to be exactly where my father was standing the night he decided a stranger was worth $8. The room had gone quiet. Sloane Ackerley was still smiling, but it had begun to set the way plaster sets because a cold thread of something was starting to move through her, and she could not yet name it. "His name is Ezra Booker," Adele said. "For 11 years he has been the anonymous chairman of the Walter Hendricks Foundation. The foundation's endowment is the largest single deposit relationship in this entire bank. The liquidity of every branch we operate, including this one, including the floor you're standing on, is underwritten in part by his $86 million. None of you knew that because he asked us not to tell you. He wanted to be invisible. He wanted to be judged as an ordinary man." Adele let that sit for one full second. "This morning at 9:12, the manager of this branch decided what an ordinary man was worth." Every head in the room turned slowly towards Sloane Ackerley. Sloane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The blood had left her face so completely that the woman from the regional paper watching through a camera would later say it looked like a special effect, like someone had reached into the frame and turned the color knob down on one single person while everyone around her stayed vivid. "She fired him over $8. Adele went on, and her voice never rose, which made it worse. "An $8 machine fault that Mr. Booker had reported in writing 3 weeks ago, a report this manager personally reviewed and closed to save the cost of a service call. It's in the system. Under her login. Time-stamped. She had 60 seconds and a phone call that would have cleared the whole thing, and she chose instead to walk a 52-year-old man across this lobby in front of his coworkers and his 7-year-old daughter, under my father's portrait, on the 100th anniversary of the day he decided this bank would be the place that bets on people. That's..." Sloane finally found her voice, and it came out thin and scrabbling. "There was a cash variance. I followed protocol. Ask anyone. Ask Grace. Grace signed the reload. Grace will tell you there was a discrepancy. It was the worst possible name to reach for. Grace Liu was standing near the front exactly where Adele had asked her to stay. She did not sit down this time. There was a discrepancy, Grace said, and her voice shook and held. In the machine. He filed the ticket 3 weeks ago. I watched him file it. He asked you to pull the log this morning. 60 seconds, he said. And you told him you didn't need a lecture from a teller. She was crying now, and still she did not stop. I sat down when you walked him out. I've been sick about it all day. I'm not sitting down now. 200 people looked from the crying 26-year-old back to Sloane Ackerley, and the arithmetic of the room completed itself in total silence. That's not... Sloane tried again and heard how it sounded and reached drowning for the only plank left. I didn't know who he... And there it was, the sentence that finished her. She said it in front of 200 people and a newspaper camera, and she heard it land and she could not pull it back. I didn't know who he was. No, Adele Hendricks said quietly. You didn't. That's the entire point. My father built a bank on the idea that it shouldn't matter who he was. That you treat the man in the worn coat exactly the way you'd treat the man you knew was worth $86 million, because you can never actually tell the difference. And the trying to tell the difference is the whole disease. She looked at Sloane with something that was almost pity, and was not quite. You just told a room full of people that your standard of decency depends on knowing what someone's worth. You've been managing my father's branch. You never understood the first thing about it. Sloane Ackerley stood alone in a spreading circle of quiet. Brandon Teague, her assistant manager, had physically taken a step away from her, the oldest instinct in the world, the one that abandons the sinking without deciding to. And then Adele turned to the room and said, Is Ezra still in the building? Somebody find Ezra. None of this exists without him. The back office door opened. Ezra Booker came out in the same worn coat he'd been fired in, holding the hand of a 7-year-old girl who was carrying a slightly crumpled construction paper birthday card. The room turned. One of the old retirees started clapping, and then it caught the way fire catches, and 200 people were on their feet. Ezra did not gloat. He walked to the front and he stopped in front of Sloane Ackerley, who could not look at him. And he said the only thing he said to her all day quietly enough that only the front row and one newspaper microphone caught it. You had 60 seconds and the truth on your side, and you spent it deciding what I was worth. He shook his head slowly. That was the choice. Not the $8. The $8 was just the day it showed. Then he stepped past her and picked up his daughter and lifted her so she could reach the microphone. Do you want to give the bank its card now, baby? Nia Booker leaned into the mic in front of 200 people and said, Happy 100th birthday. My dad works here. He doesn't take things. It was, everyone agreed afterward, the best speech given that day. Sloane Ackerley was placed on administrative leave before the caterers had finished packing up and terminated for cause 8 days later. The video the regional photographer captured, I didn't know who he was, ran locally and then did not stay local, and the sentence became a small permanent shorthand for a specific kind of failure. But the video is not what ended her, and this matters. What ended her was the stack Adele Hendricks had quietly built between 11:40 and 1:15, the service ticket she'd closed to save money and then used as a weapon under her own login time stamped. And the pattern of 3 older employees eased out under one manager in a single year, which an employment attorney characterized in a filing Sloane's own lawyer could not get dismissed as pretextual. She is not managing anywhere now. In her one public statement, she said she had followed established protocol, which is true and which is exactly the problem, and which roughly 200 people watched her discover in real time. Grace Liu, who tried to tell the truth and then sat down and hated herself for the sitting, was promoted twice in the following year, the second time into the branch manager's office, with the frosted glass and the brass nameplate, which now reads G. Liu. She keeps one thing on the wall behind her desk, a laminated copy of Ticket 41-09, the $8 machine fault, next to a line in her own handwriting that says, the 60 seconds. She tells every new hire the same thing. It takes 60 seconds to check. Check. Ezra and Nia Booker did not change very much because they had not needed anything to begin with. Ezra came back to Fairview not to the teller window this time, but as what Adele Hendricks insisted on naming the branch's trust officer, a title she made up on the spot and then made real, whose actual job is to be the person a bank customer talks to when the system has decided they're not worth 60 seconds. He still drives the hatchback. He still packs the same lunch. Naya's construction paper birthday card hangs framed in the Fairview lobby under the portrait of Walter Hendricks at exactly the height where a 7-year-old can see it. The rest resolved quickly and without ceremony. Brandon Teague, who stepped away from Sloan on that stage, the way you step away from a live wire, transferred out within the month, and was quietly passed over for the manager job he'd been promised. The regional director who'd set the modernization metrics revised them less because of conscience than because the alternative had just been photographed. And the foundation's $86 million stayed exactly where it was at Hendricks Mutual because Ezra Booker had never once been the kind of man who moved money to make a point. He'd made the point with 60 seconds and a 7-year-old and a birthday card. The money was never the weapon. It was only ever the thing that made them willing at last to listen, and Ezra knew the difference and said so to anyone who asked. There was one thing left, and it came the following spring, and it was the card the day had been holding in reserve. When Hendricks Mutual restored the Fairview branch for its second century, the contractors opened the original 1924 cornerstone to reseal it. Inside, along with the expected things, a newspaper, some coins, a founding charter, was a sealed envelope added later in handwriting the archivist recognized. Walter Hendricks had opened the cornerstone once himself, quietly decades after the founding, and put something in. It was addressed in the old man's walnut-knuckled hand to "Whoever runs this branch when it forgets." Adele Hendricks read it aloud in the lobby at the resealing. It was short. Her father had written that a bank is the easiest place in the world to lose the plot, because a bank spends all day measuring people by a number, and a person who measures people by a number for long enough will eventually forget that the number was never the point. He wrote that there would come a day, there always comes a day, when someone who ran this branch would look at a person in a worn coat and see only what they appeared to be worth. And he wrote that on that day he wanted whoever found this letter to remember one thing. I built this whole bank because a boy stole $8 and turned out to be worth everything. If you ever meet him, and you will, he'll be standing right where you least expect him, for God's sake. Give him the cocoa before you check his pockets. Ezra Booker was standing in the front row when Adele read it. He was 53 by then. He had a foundation with his mentor's name on it, and a daughter who told strangers he didn't take things, and a title someone had invented so that no one else would ever again be walked across that marble floor for want of 60 seconds. He did not say anything when she finished reading. He just reached up the way he had on the worst morning of the year and touched the bottom of the portrait's frame. "I carried it," the gesture said. "You gave me a reason, and I carried it the whole way." Then he took his daughter's hand, and they went to get the terrible, wonderful cocoa. "All right, let's be honest with each other. Ezra Booker isn't real. Neither is Sloan Ackerley, or the branch on the Founder's Corner, or the old man with a face like a walnut and a story about $8. But the 60 seconds are real. They happen every single day in bank branches and job interviews and emergency rooms and front desks to people in worn coats who get measured in a second and a half by someone who has decided that worth is a thing you can see. Somebody looks at the coat, the car, the age, the accent, and makes the call, and then spends the rest of the day defending the call, instead of spending 60 seconds finding out they were wrong. And here's the trap I want you to notice about this one, because it's the trap in almost all of these. The reason Ezra got justice is that Ezra secretly had $86 million and a founder's daughter who happened to walk through a door at 9:15. That's the fantasy part. That's the part that makes it a story. Because most people in the worn coat don't have $86 million. Most people who get walked across the lobby over $8 are exactly as poor as they look. And no black car pulls up, and no chairman takes the microphone, and the machine gets serviced next week, and nobody ever finds out they were telling the truth. So the real question this story asks isn't would you have been kind to the secret millionaire? It's this: the man was worth exactly the same at 9:12 when everyone thought he was poor as he was at 4 o'clock when they found out he wasn't. Nothing about him changed. Only what you knew about him changed. So would you have given him the 60 seconds before you found out? Or do you? If you're honest, only check the pockets you think are empty. Tell me down in the comments. Be honest. I read them. And if you've ever been the person in the worn coat, if somebody ever decided what you were worth before you opened your mouth, type, "Give him the cocoa" below, and go see how many people are standing in that lobby with you. It's going to be more than you think. It always is. If this one landed hit like so it reaches the next person who's about to be measured by their coat and subscribe, there's a new one every week. Take care of each other out there. And give people the 60 seconds. All of them. even the ones who look like they can't afford it, especially those.